a picture? Excuse me, ma'am. Can I take a picture of you?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Thanks. Oh, nice. There we go.
Hold up, hold up. Ma'am. Yes.
Yeah. Go. Thank you.
I don't like doing the appeal to authority, but she is our authority. I'm also cute as hell, so like double plus.
Huh? Oh, thank you.
Yes! Somebody wipe me!
No, she's a talker. Good luck with that. You gotta get a ball gag. There's a reason you went in the office, because you like to argue. Again, 18 plus panel. If you can't handle a little bit of salty words, you might want to go someplace else.
I taste like salt, by the way.
Gross. Go take a bath. Didn't you have the panel where you were like, okay guys, you have to use soap and water?
Yes, and then right after I took a shower.
See, she doesn't need a microphone. She's loud enough.
You're welcome.
All right, we're gonna hopefully here. I don't know. You might just decide after we start talking about some of this really gross shit you've made a mistake. Did you just trip out of your chair?
No, I scooted up. I did not fall this time.
Okay.
This time.
How much more we got? Are we gonna have enough room for everybody? Are we gonna have to tell people to pack it in and make their buddies like smile?
There's a single seat up in the front who wants to be front and center. Single seat up in the front.
There you go.
Hey!
Woo! Good man, good man.
Join us at the firing line.
What procedures?
COVID procedures.
This is Texas. There's no COVID procedures.
Tejas does what Tejas wants.
I'm just checking this from out of state.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
Seriously, this is Texas. There's no COVID restrictions. We're basically a free con.
Whatever. If you're from Texas, you know how Texas be.
I mean, let's be honest, after we've been, or at least some of us have been to so many like anime conventions smelling terrible BO and people who have no idea what body hygiene is, I think we might be immune to like a lot of things. Maybe. That's just a guess. If the person next to you starts koofing, just strangle them or tell them to leave the room then, if it becomes an issue, if you're scared, okay? right, is that everybody?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. How are
Oh, he got you a bottle of water. He's trying to waifu you.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So before people start throwing, is that everybody? Okay, are we good?
We good?
We good? One more? Oh my God. Come on, we're waiting on you. We're gonna get started. That's it. I'm calling. We're getting started. Okay. So unfortunately, I do have some video in here, and we don't have a very good audio hookup from my computer to like the sound system. So we're gonna really ghettoize this, DashCon this, which we will be speaking about DashCon when it comes to audio, and yeah. So if I skip through something and you have a question or something, we are going to have our nice little powwow of feelings jam afterwards of terrible experiences or a convention you believe deserves to be voted to be part of the trash fire. How many of you are familiar with DashCon? How many of you are familiar with Rainforest? How many of you are familiar with Fire Festival? How many of you are familiar with Las Pegasus Con?
None of it.
Yeah, never say yes to bronies. Yeah, I get you.
Internet historian's not on that one yet.
Oh yeah, he covers everything better than I do. He's not even American, so it's not like he's experienced half of this, but he does his research, so give him that.
10 out of 10.
What about TanaCon? Did any of y'all go to that travesty?
I've heard about TanaCon.
TanaCon, yeah, whenever YouTubers decide that they're smart enough that they can run a convention, unlike Ja Rule, who's a musician who thought he was smart enough to run a convention on an island. All right. Welcome to the Con-Tastrophe. We are also part of the Tastrophe. And if you want to join for the Tastrophe, there will be a trash fire out here probably tomorrow, because that seems to be the way that the panels and the convention seems to be going after the alerts for missing children. If you like boomer memes, you're going to get a lot of boomer memes, so buckle in.
Cheers.
There you go, Doomers and Zoomers. All right.
I thought we were talking about bubblegum crisis.
We're talking about what? What? Who?
Boomers bubblegum crisis.
So, why are we covering trash fires and why are we talking about it without sharing a whole bunch of shit to begin with, and we're going full on death by PowerPoint on this? Because we want you to recognize a trash fire before you attend a trash fire, or find a way to document it so that all of us can laugh at it. We're gonna talk about shit in this order. We're gonna talk about the idiots who organize the shit show. We're gonna talk about the people who get involved in the shit show, the people who are the volunteers for the shit show, and the people who make the shit show happen, the attendees. We are all pieces of shit. Welcome to the diaper. Yeah, the audio thing. It was good, yeah, it was gonna be really cute and clever. Good luck with that. All right, so owners and organizers. I know a lot of us like to bitch about them, a lot of us like to complain about them, a lot of us would like some refunds and our money back, please. And I think some people from this convention probably feel the same way. Okay, so ideally, a good owner is an adult. Legal drinking age too, because you're gonna be going out drinking. What the fuck is a convention for? But to be an adult and party and have fun. Have experience with organization, has core skills with signing contracts, dealing with lawyers, making sure that if there is an incident, that it gets properly handled with the authorities and dealt with afterwards. Mentally stable is, I know you're thinking, of course that's the obvious, why is that even on the slide? Because it has to be said, because bronies. And furries. Don't get me wrong, furries are great, bronies are great, they're not great in groups. They're like rats. Rats are great. Rats are great as pets. I'm not going to be buying pictures of rats making out on, what was the TV channel where they were selling 2 rats making out and you had to call in? Yeah. So there used to be a concept, and this is going to be me revealing what a boomer I am. There used to be a concept of you would watch TV shows, I believe it was like QVC or something like that, and they would try to sell you shit. Like, fat, get a treadmill. Smell like shit, have some perfume. Would you like some cheap crap made out of plastic that's gonna fall apart in 2 weeks? Great, we got you covered. Okay, Grandma.
head on and play.
But long story short, at one point in time, furries used to sell their artwork on QVC. And the reference I made was people were selling rat porn on QVC, and people were calling in, buying this rat porn for thousands of dollars. Not like 30 bucks, like $2,000, $3,000. And it wasn't just one. It wasn't just one viewership episode either. It was multiple weekends and weeks. So furries got money, and furries ain't embarrassed. That's why I say mental stability is important for running a convention. And the ability to, comprehend responsibility and accountability, because otherwise people are not getting refunds or they're not getting their badges, like this convention did, passed over to the next year, or they get screwed with the hotels. And hotel fuck-ups are very common. DashCon is so infamous that it travels the world, and it burns down other conventions with it. And if you do not advertise your convention appropriately or in multiple venues, you're going to get a one type of person. Back to furry conventions and Rainforest. They advertised on furry art forums, and I can't even remember all the name of the forums, because I'm not a furry, believe it or not. And another example is in fact DashCon itself, because it advertised itself on Tumblr. It didn't advertise itself at other conventions. Like, if you've ever gone to an artist alley or a vendor's hall and you've seen advertisements for other conventions, it's because, hey, it's an anime convention too. It's in a different area. Would you like to do anime convention, Electric Boogaloo? Come join us. Well, that's not what DashCon did. That's not what Fire Festival did. That's not what Las Pegasus Unicon did. That's not what TanaCon did. They advertised specifically to their crazed fans, if you understand what I'm saying. And if a bunch of your fans happen to be fetishists, Tumblr nerds, or, I don't know, foot fags, yeah, exactly. You're gonna have a bad time because there's no normies to break up the mix. And I'm sorry if I'm using some really weird jargon. I'm pretty sure most of you are internet savvy. So what ends up happening is they look at the convention and they say, great, this is now our kink convention. And if any of y'all are familiar with Rainforest, that resulted with people's cars having poo diapers, used poo diapers, smeared all over their cars, pee in hallways, pee in hallways, yes. People were just, it was like homeless people, but they're not. They're just taking a random piss in the hallway. Or you have BDSM in the hallways where people are wearing bondage gear. At least here we have it with the hentai area, it's behind, curtains, and you have to prove how old you are. Yeah, some conventions, if you're not careful, that escapes the little closed area where it deserves to be locked up. Yeah, some conventions, if you're not careful, that escapes the little closed area where it deserves to be locked up.
Because we all remember the early 2000s and yaoi paddles, don't we?
Oh, how many of you had a bruised ass because of a yaoi paddle? Yeah, okay. So, to describe what yaoi paddles are for the Zoomers, have you ever seen a canoe paddle, a wooden canoe paddle? So for a while there, it was very popular for vendors to etch a word like yuri, yaoi, sumi, ook, whatever the fuck you want, onto the paddle, sell it to the person for 20 bucks, and they would take the paddle and start paddling people in the convention. Without permission, without consent.
Unconsensual paddling.
Unconsensual, and it was not an unusual thing for the paddle to hit somebody's butt cheek so hard it would break the paddle.
Yeah, and these were like the ones
Oh, yeah.
I got hit with.
I remember.
And I don't know if you're aware, but that's a liability for security. You ever think, why do we have weapons checked now? Now you kind of have an idea of why we have weapons checked now. People were using weapons like paddles or being very unsafe with them.
Yes, they were hitting minors, and that's liability for the convention because they allowed it to happen.
Yeah, whenever you have a 13-year-old who has a cracked hip because another 13-year-old hit them with a paddle that's about an inch thick of wood from running full full blast down the hallway, yeah, you're gonna have a lawsuit.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to be very careful about your public relations not being only on, you know, your Fur Affinity, your Tumblr, your personal OnlyFans. Yeah, your OnlyFans advertisements for your conventions, because all you're gonna get is the weird fetish people, and they're gonna give you a bad time. All right. So does anybody know what we're looking at here? This is in fact DashCon. This is also a copy of their contractual agreement with the hotel and the convention center. I don't know if you can see that, but in 11 July 2014, up front before the convention, they owed the hotel and the convention center $20,000 that they had not received from selling badges. They had not seen, that's an empty artist alley there. They did not sell enough for their artist alley tables. They did not sell enough of their badges. They did not sell enough for their vendor's room. They did not have cash to pay for this. And instead of canceling the convention because they could not pay the money up front, they began to extort people in the line picking up their badges for donations to last minute pay for the convention. Now, remember when we went to the owner slide saying you have to have a competent owner? The individual who was running this convention was under the age of 18 and was signing off on these contracts with her mother's permission, who was way supportive of her in all the wrong ways. Yeah, exactly. Imagine being 17, 18 years old and you owe $20,000 to a hotel. You're not adult enough to say, okay, this isn't happening, we have to cancel. Instead, they went in and started selling concert tickets to a concert they didn't have, that the concert band had left already, and said, please donate money to us so that we can actually have the vendor's room and the hotel and everything and run the convention, otherwise we have to shut it down now. They got $17,000 in donations in cash the day of.
Yeah.
$17,000, not out of badges, not out of table rentals, just purely, please, please, we can't have the convention unless please, can we have the money? Now the problem is like, once you actually go through the contract, you're pretty much on the hook for the contract. So the rest of the money had to come out of your pocket. Oh yeah, have you heard of Abandoned Hobby Lobby Con?
Is that a ZooeyCon in Tulsa, Oklahoma?
Yes.
I heard about that.
This is actually a abandoned Hobby Lobby that was abandoned in 1998. As a matter of fact, when it closed down, I went in and I bought myself a ton of art supplies there for like $1 each, like a 14-page Bristol pad for $1. And let that hurt you if you're an artist. This building was closed in 1998. And the convention decided that because they could no longer get their original venue, and because the contracts had expired with other groups that they were trying to get a venue with, that they would just borrow this Hobby Lobby that was supposed to be going through renovation to be converted into a church. And this is the artist alley of this convention. This is the vendor's room of this convention. And it is 4 miles away from the convention.
What?
It was 4 miles down the road in 98-degree weather with no sidewalks from the convention.
Yeah.
And they didn't even have transportation to this area
For the first day.
for the first day. They had to actually beg a school to let them borrow their buses to get to and from the vendor's room. Imagine making the mistake of looking at a map, being from the East Coast or West Coast, and saying, oh, that's just a block, not realizing they're mile-wide blocks. And trying to walk in your cosplay 4 miles in 98-degree weather, again, no sidewalks, to a convention in an abandoned Hobby Lobby.
I actually ferried people at this convention. I did attend this one, and I picked up several people in my minivan and tunneled them back and forth with water.
Do we want to talk about the lawsuit that's going on with that one?
So there are ADA violation complaints against Tokyo and Tulsa, the American with Disabilities Act. So in
in general, as a business, you are supposed to, for certain things, accommodate those with disabilities. Like people who cannot walk, people who cannot see. That's why you have Braille on the bathroom, signs that has like women's, men's, or numbers have the little bumps. That's Braille. Actually, I believe you read it this way. My mistake. And so the violation is that they did not have proper accommodations for those in wheelchairs to be transported between venues. So when they rented the buses, it took them a time to get the disability capable ones. So they left people in wheelchairs sitting outside of the abandoned Hobby Lobby for, I believe, one of the complaints read 2 hours. And several buses came by and no one could take this person in a wheelchair. So you file a complaint against the business, and currently, as I last checked, this is pending. However, apparently the original company that ran Tokyo and Tulsa no longer exists.
Of course not.
But, and yes, the person who was left about 2 hours out suffered heat stroke, because this is Oklahoma in July. So yeah, that's not something you do, and they were a 10-year plus convention at this point and should have known better. This wasn't a first-year con. This wasn't a podunk convention. This was a well-established and known convention in Oklahoma.
That being said,
Yeah, but it's Oklahoma.
if you're not careful and you see a convention that's last minute trying to find a venue, that would probably be a warning to not attend that convention. Because there's a very good chance that they have either not paid for the contract's been broken, or you're gonna end up in a dumpster fire like this. By the way, they actually ended up kicking out people from the artist alley as they were reporting on the abandoned Hobby Lobby Con. Alley Fluff, during the actual convention, and did not refund her the artist alley table money.
So, I saw some of this.
People are leaving already.
So apparently she texted something like, well, yeah, you can ghost this one, haha, on Twitter. And they found out, and they sent 4 or 5. I wasn't able to count.
We can hear it just fine.
Oh, hey, they're great.
She's loud.
So there was 4 to 5 large, very large men surrounding her table. She is a very little girl. She is like 5'4", and most of these men were 6 foot plus. So there's a lot, you can actually look up, there's an interview with her about this online under, I don't remember the site.
Audio doesn't work, remember? So even if I play the video, they're not gonna see it.
I meant like, do you remember the
Yeah,
site?
just hold the mic up to the speaker.
You can basically Google it.
Yeah, you can Google it, my
Yeah.
bad. But overall, like, this is how, not only did we have these bus issues, building issues, but they, kicked out an artist in probably the worst manner ever.
Basically, if you pay for a table, you're trying to make money for your table, and just because you make a joke on Twitter doesn't mean you should get banned from a convention. Especially whenever you're an abandoned Hobby Lobby Con. Or speaking of abandoned Hobby Lobby Cons, that island, the Fire Festival, how many of you actually did your research on that? One? Okay, cool. So there was like one venue that served food at this location, and they were getting ready to get hit by a tropical storm. Yeah, and it was not a residential, like what's the word? No, for the hotel. It was like a resort. Thank you. Hard R word. Thank you. Resort. Last resort. So they were trying to feed not only their own venue rentals, but they were also trying to feed a bunch of people living off of in tents off of nothing on this island right before a storm hit. And then because it's over in was it Jamaican or Dominican or whatever it is, they were Bahamas. Thank you. Brain smooth. Tired.
Yeah, welcome to the club.
Not enough sleep. Plenty of alcohol. But because of that, like, they couldn't leave the island either because of the way that the airport functioned. So imagine being out in the middle of nowhere, dealing with mosquitoes, storms, you have a ball pit and a tent to sleep on, stealing other people's like food out of their tents and stuff, And the only place you can find food and water is a hotel that's already been booked. I know we're making fun of this other convention because of the fact that there's actually lawsuits over it, but I'm pretty sure there's international investigations going on with Fire Festival still. And that was like, what, 5 years ago now?
Something like that.
All right. But anyways, the point is that if you see these signs, it is better to run away than to suffer the pain of putting up with, starving, potentially dying, or becoming disabled as a result of dealing with the incidents at hand.
Yeah.
And a perfect example of that is, how many of you have heard about the chlorine attack at the furry convention with the chlorine gas? Yes.
Wow.
So it's a little convoluted on the lore, but I kind of remember a little bit about it being talked at the time. An individual got a stain on his fursuit and was asking for advice online on how to clean his fursuit. And he was given advice, or she was given advice, I can't remember, that ammonia and chlorine mixed together makes an amazing combo for getting stains out of a fursuit. Now, if you're not familiar with it, ammonia and chlorine is basically chlorine gas, and it will kill people. And so they had to evacuate the entire hotel for this emergency, and it took them the entire night before anybody could go back to bed, because otherwise they were going to suffer chlorine poisoning. Now, for those who aren't familiar with what chlorine gas is, that's what they used in World War I to kill other soldiers in the trenches, because it falls to the ground and it basically destroys your lungs. Your lungs bleed to death and you drown, kind of, more or less. It's like the equivalent of putting gasoline or diesel into foam and making yourself some really fun, sticky stuff that just lights oh so well when you can't get it off your skin.
I love the smell of napalm.
No, yeah, somebody else likes the smell of napalm in the morning. All right, so sometimes you can have a guest, sometimes you can have a person who's too good, and they can ruin your convention. And can anybody think of an example? And I'm not necessarily talking about a particular guest here. I'm talking about YouTubers. Tana. Remember, there used to be YouTube conventions and meetups and everything like that, and now they don't exist anymore. They don't exist anymore because somebody was an e-celebrity, got butthurt, decided that they were going to make their own convention and kill everybody else's convention when they don't have any experience or brain cells to rub together to make it work. Well, let's just say that's a far, far more common thing than you realize. Because I do believe that is the current issue that we're experiencing with Twitch right now. I don't believe we're going to have another TwitchCon, not because of COVID, but probably because of some individuals who are e-celebrities on Twitch who brought in the hot tub meta, if you can say, or brought it, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. ASMR! Oh, horse!
What does this have to do with gaming?
Wasn't there that one lady?
What about VidCon? VidCon is still going on in California.
So that being said, if you've been experiencing the troubles of changing venue rooms or having things get canceled that should be going on, I'm not talking shit, but there's a potential there. That's the joke.
Fucking elephant in the goddamn room.
It's okay, we're smooth brain too. Don't worry, we understand you.
Alright. Next time, maybe.
Alright, so would you like to get into more details of the contractual issues, the guest issues, the volunteer issues? Does anybody have any requests that you'd like more details on? All of it. All of it. Volunteers. Okay, would you like to be told how volunteering works for conventions usually? Okay, so normally when you volunteer for a convention, you can either be general volunteers where you do door duty, or you can do security duty, or if you have a specialty when it comes to, like, say, IMSA work or that kind of stuff, you can go work at a first aid station. Now, all of those individuals who volunteer are usually controlled by a volunteer convention organizer or head. And that individual can make or break, and usually does break, conventions. A perfect example is if you are volunteering for a convention to get volunteer time for, say, I don't know. What is it? What was
Or scholarships.
scholarships?
College
College scholarships, or say you've got probation. You can get really screwed because if they don't submit the paperwork, you didn't volunteer, so you're not getting compensated. Some conventions, they don't compensate you at all, they just give you a badge if you're lucky. Some of the conventions, you can end up working 16 hours, or in my case, 3 days straight, with no sleep, and living off of Red Bulls. Yeah, it was a nightmare. I was working convention security, I was working the vendor's room, I was working a little bit of guest relations, I was working a little bit of volunteers relations, and I was also making sure that people were getting food and water because they weren't being allowed to leave their post at the doors to check badges. If you're a 16-year-old kid and you're sitting at the door for the entirety of the convention and you haven't eaten and you haven't drinking, and you're being told by the convention volunteer head that if you do not show up or if you leave, you're going to be banned from the convention, as a kid, you take them serious. Legally, they can't do that. And, technically, they'll do it anyways. I was once told, after I found out I was going to have surgery for cancer treatment the week before a convention, and I told them I couldn't show up, literally a week before, that I was banned from the convention.
What?
And this is the same convention I stayed awake for 3 days working with. Yep.
Yeah.
So not only did they not care, not only did they not compensate me or make exceptions, no skin off their back. The other problem is that sometimes you can have people who purposely tell volunteers to go to the wrong location. So they're not even where they need to be to do their job. How many of y'all saw the Power Rangers guarding Artist Alley on Thursday, Friday? Yeah. Cosplays. Yeah. Do you know it's actually fairly standard for most conventions with volunteers to give them a shirt that says staff so you can recognize them? Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, you're not supposed to be in cosplay because how are we supposed to know that you're actually staff? Yeah. So if you're not even wearing it, how do you know if you're actually on duty or not? I have been asked multiple times at this convention, and she has as well, where to find things, where to go, what to do, because people for some reason thought I was staff. I'm just a panelist at this convention. I'm not actually staff.
I'm just cute.
Sorry, talking over you. Okay, so we've covered volunteers. Do you have any specific questions on volunteers? Yes.
No, I just have some.
Okay, well, what's your question?
I was do you know what was the case in using the space at the Comic-Con? Just they celebs and get paid?
Okay, so another big problem that happens with celebrities who are guests of conventions is, and this is a perfect example too, I'm glad you brought that up. How many of you are familiar with Welcome to Night Vale? Okay, how many of you are familiar with Lord of the Rings? Okay, how many of you are familiar with the actor who played Aragorn? How many of you have heard of the Little Bits of Earth, or also known as Tintamoot? So back in 2003, there was a convention that was supposed to take place. Oh, you're gonna love this story. All these people who left are gonna regret that they left. So the earliest known shit fucking fire convention that I can think of is a Lord of the Rings convention that was supposed to take place in Oregon. And it was called Tintamoot, or a Little Bit of Earth. How many of you are familiar with the Final Fantasy house?
Oh.
So take Final Fantasy house, combine, and by the way, Final Fantasy house is kind of a cult based on Final Fantasy. You look it up later. Down the rabbit hole, he's got a good, So imagine if you take Final Fantasy house, combine it with the Hobbits from Hobbiton, and then add a convention into that mix. And this actually resulted in a person dying, by the way.
Oh, okay. All right. That's bad.
We're good. We'll just leave it there.
Shit.
Just, it's Usa. Think of something calming. So this individual was lying not only to the people helping her run the convention about whether or not they are reincarnated hobbits in the bodies of young girls, but was also masquerading as 3 different people to run a charity based on Lord of the Rings, to run a convention based on Lord of the Rings, and have their own version of a harem of a bunch of lesbian girls who all think that they were reincarnated Sam, Bilbo, Frodo, all that, in a house.
It was
3 different people. Yeah, this happened 2003.
Yeah.
Trust me, I'm getting back to the guests. So, what was the actor's name who played Aragon again? Yeah, Viggo Mortensen. Imagine being Viggo Mortensen. You're not an American. You don't know these people, and you have just finished doing the original, filming for Lord of the Rings. And all of a sudden, you have a convention who's invited you as a guest to come to their convention as their primary guest. They will pay for your flight. They will pay for your hotel, the housing, food, whatever have you. Imagine being Viggo and coming and showing up to somebody's apartment and being told, "There's your spot on the floor."
No way.
That happened. This is a real story. No, he didn't. He thought he was still going to the convention because he believed that he was doing it as charity work. Again, writing off stuff that like volunteer hours. He believed he was doing it as charity work, so he could write off as charity work. So he slept on the bottom of the floor of their apartment. Yeah, and then whenever the convention was supposed to go on, the individual who was running this convention, again, it's the same person who owns this apartment and has all their, Final Fantasy house, but it's Hobbiton going on, decided to lie and claim that they committed suicide the day of.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they killed off one of their alternate personalities. I know it suffers. The alternate personality is dead, and that's not even the death that happened. So, as a result, Viggo decides, you know what? I think I've made a bad decision here. This is going really bad. So he ends up buying himself a ticket and flying back home. But he still had to spend a night on the bottom of sleeping on the floor of Final Fantasy house in that apartment. And the individual who was, of course, playing these suicidal games and whatnot didn't actually have the convention, so a ton of people showed up to this tiny little, are you familiar with motels, how small they can be? This is the size of the supposed convention. It's supposed to be a big deal, right? Takes all of the donated charity money through their charity that they're running as a scam and runs off with it. And their girlfriend becomes hysterically suicidal, mentally broken, to the point that they had to go to a mental health hospital before they could recover. And it wasn't just one, it was 3 individuals. She actually ended up writing a book on it, by the way. It's called When the Fan Hits the Shit.
Yeah.
So there is a book on this if you'd like further details. It's called When the Fan Hits the Shit. Yes, that's the actual term. So if you want to give it a read, that's all from her perspective. But also remember, she did say that she had a mental break during this episode. This individual who ran off with the money and whatnot ended up actually being in a murder investigation later on, and resulted in one of their secondary girlfriends or girlfriends after this incident actually being murdered during a Twilight thing, if you want to get into that. Yeah, vampires, werewolves, whatever have you. And then eventually they got back into the supernatural death deal thing. This person is fairly well known. People track them just to keep other people from getting murdered.
Yes.
So, and the girl was 21 years old, was going out with their supposed boyfriend/girlfriend at the time, with a couple other guys, and there's drugs and alcohol involved, and ended up not making it home. Which is another thing you do whenever you go to the convention, is you gotta watch out for all the alcoholics and stuff, because it is tragic,
Yes.
Okay, so we covered a little bit of that. Welcome to Night Vale was smart. They learned their lesson from what happened to Viggo. Whenever DashCon decided that they didn't have money up front to pay for their hotel rooms or for their viewing fees, because whenever you come to these conventions and you're a well-known guest, you have convention fees. You're paying for my hotel room, you're paying for my food. I'm taking my time out. This is a job to me, so you're paying me for my time.
$250 per diem.
So, we're dead now. So they decided, hey, this looks like a scam. We've heard about this kind of shit before. This isn't the first time that we've, heard horror stories. So we're just going to get up and go. And they did. And the convention decided that they were going to blame it on Welcome to Night Vale.
Yep.
DashCon decided that they were going to tell the people in the convention that Welcome to Night Vale took the money and left.
Yes.
And it wasn't just Welcome to Night Vale, it was also one of the other bestie guests or some commentary podcast.
I think I heard that Nightingale was in the middle of a tour in Europe. So in the middle of that, they left, went to DashCon, and then were like, what the hell?
Yeah.
I'm kind of missing what we were already doing, because they were supposedly promised a very well.
Well, I think I remember them actually doing a tour in the east, but I could be wrong. I think that's probably right. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were already making money in other ways. They didn't want to pay out of pocket for their own hotel room and pay out of pocket for their own visit and food and everything like that, and then be promised that they'd get paid back later. Another example of guests that have a bad time. How many of you are familiar with John St. John? You know who John St. John is? Are you familiar with video games at all? Anybody? Okay. Duke Nukem. The voice actor for Duke Nukem is John St. John. And how many of you are familiar with MagFest? How many of you are familiar with
the last one.
You went to the last one?
The 2019 one.
2019? Yeah. I've been attending MagFest
I'm
since...
sorry, 2020.
Okay. I was attending MagFest when it was back when it was called the Lumberjack Convention as a joke.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, when they first started, yeah.
So whenever you accidentally double book a hotel, like next to a wedding or next to a lumberjack convention, you get kind of misnomers. John St. John was a wonderful guest, but he's a terrible person when he's drunk. He's very angry, very combative, and I know I'm talking shit here. But whenever you start having a guest picking fights with your attendees, that becomes a problem. You know, I know a lot of us are very familiar with the Vic nonsense, and unfortunately, I can actually confirm some of those rumors because of TNT 2009 when he was a guest and wasn't invited back. Conventions will actually go out of their way to protect guests who have done bad things. And I have a belief that you should forgive and forget, but you shouldn't forget, you know, totally. Because otherwise, you have people picking fights drunk with other con attendees. And I still think that the individual that he picked a fight with never got over it, because I talk to him every once in a while. They're still really butthurt about that. They got a black eye from John St. John, so yeah. They got a black eye from John St. John because they put Tabasco in his drink, that they were doing Tabasco shots, and he was too drunk to understand what he's being told, is basically what happened. So, does anybody else have any questions, other stuff related to conventions that we can talk about, crazy stuff? Wes?
Has there ever been a case where a guest completely ruins one event in a con? Has that event canceled for everybody else?
I've heard of one, and I can't think of it. I'm going to let her think about it, because she's probably going to remember it before I do. But that has happened, and I believe it was up on a stage. I don't remember if it was like it resulted in an injury or they just pulled the person off stage. It was an older convention.
Oh, there is the guy.
It was like early 2000s. No, she's still thinking about it. I'll get back to you on that. I tell you what, I'll go and find that specifically for you, so you can go and do your little deep dive research on it. How about that? Okay, in the back, you had your hand raised as well.
Us?
Yeah, whoever had the question.
I'll go first. So, yesterday at the rave, there was somebody that I met, and he was like, I just quit staff today. I was like, why? And he was like, they told us, it was bullshit. They told us that we were gonna have a hotel room, and it was just one bed, and there was 4 people in a room.
Oh my God, I love those incidences. They do happen. They do happen. And I would believe it, because that's what happened at GlitchCon. I got stuck in a room with 4 guys and just me sleeping on the floor. And we were managing the vendors room in our artist alley.
Oh, you got.
Yeah, the conventions, if they promise you a room, that doesn't guarantee you get beds. Yeah, and that doesn't mean that they're going to compensate you for paying for a separate room on your own.
Yeah.
Yes?
I didn't bring any food with me. I'm getting a little bit hungry. So do you have any food stories that would make me less hungry?
Okay, sure. You want something gross?
Yes.
Okay, let me see.
I have one.
Uh-oh.
So I don't remember the name of the convention, but there was a convention in Texas about a decade and a half ago who had brought in a food vendor, except apparently the truck they brought, small trailer with refrigeration, turned off on the road, and they were traveling from, I want to say it was either Arkansas or Kansas. So when they arrived at the convention, every single bit of food that was brought from, for the personal food vendor there was expired, rotten, and gross. If I remember.
They didn't sell it though, did they?
No, it was not sold. surprisingly right, but it was not sold, it was trashed, and basically it was next to basically a food desert of an area, so food was very scarce. I think they call that the food, it has a
It's not
term
as
for
bad
it,
as the
I don't
cum
remember.
shots though, right?
Food desert.
Who wants to hear about cum shots? Okay. So, who remembers Acon 2015, not 2015, Acon 15, like when they were back at the airport before they moved to the downtown Sheridan? Nobody. Okay, great, I'm a boomer. So there was a private hotel room, and it has nothing to do with running the convention. Again, this has to do with the attendees of the convention running the convention. They got the clever idea that they were going to do a drinking party, like we like to do, in their hotel room. And because they were really big fans of Hentai Fest, you know, the hentai, yeah, where you play. By the way, the video they had at that one was terrible. They literally played the worst hentai they could find, and it was like watching a slideshow that just had bulging physics on it. I think it was called Sins of the Stepsister or something like that. It was terrible. Yeah. Decided that they would have the clever idea, because of Hentai Fest, and they're all big boys, that they were going to do cum shots. So they made Jello shots, and they would top it. And then they decided that they had the best idea, that they were going to walk through the convention and offer people cum shots. I don't know if they were drinking age. I know for a fact I wasn't. And there were girls doing it.
Were they aware that?
Yes, they were told. That's even worse. Like imagine having a guy coming up to you and say, "Hey, it's a Jello shot, but it's a cum shot." Oh, okay. Why is it called that? Oh, I jizzed on it. Are you gonna do it? Sure. Yeah. That's a gross one that I saw in
That was
person.
the late 90s.
Yep.
If they just said it.
Yeah, I was offered one. I didn't eat it.
I didn't need it.
No, it's not my thing. No, thankfully I was, no. But there was there was one, I think it was one of the girls that was actually with a Kuja cosplayer that ended up having one, yeah. And there was a bar downstairs too. Yeah. Yeah, it's just, yeah, I agree. But, you know, some weirdos are into it. Yes?
Nowhere near as bad as Matt's. But shortly after the blue waffle meme,
Oh, yeah, I love blue
I
waffles.
was at a con and somebody had a platter of waffles that I'm hoping was blue food coloring.
Oh, yeah, it probably was.
Oh yeah, it was pretty good.
That's cool. Yeah. How many of you are used to experiencing people offering you weird drinks and random food at a convention?
That's half the fun.
I would.
Yeah, don't take it ever. You don't know. It could be roofied. Hell, it could be bread and it could be roofied. I don't suggest it. That's how you end up in like serial killer, murder movies. Don't do it. Okay, so we're gonna go with one last convention-related question. I tell you what, we'll do two. We'll do her first, and then we'll do you, and then we'll call it like that. Yes.
Okay, I just did not remember, wasn't steam-powered giraffe supposed to be at DashCon?
Yes.
Yes, that was the music act.
They were supposed to be there, but they were never contacted. And that's who they were selling tickets to the concert to.
Yeah.
I remember, I was so into steam-powered giraffe
Yep.
at that time. I was like in middle school, and I was like, man, I should have DashCon. I want to see steam-powered giraffe.
Yes, the answer is yes, they were supposed to be there, but they didn't actually talk to Steam Powered Giraffe, and yes, they sold the tickets to the non-existent concert. Okay.
That is a violation of contract.
I was very curious about this con specifically.
Oh, the Anime Matsuri? Okay.
Delays, the
Yeah.
moving of everything,
Yeah.
and why everything just canceled willy-nilly with no explanation.
Would you like to hear my
Okay, I
perspective?
don't know that.
Okay, so my perspective is from experience, but you're only going to get the actual true answer from people who are organizing the different volunteer groups or the people who are in like the higher up echelons. You're only going to get the real answer there, and even then, you might not get the real answer because I've had people lie straight to my face before multiple times. So it's probably what happened is they didn't have their volunteers show up. They probably are understaffed with volunteers, and they probably forgot to contract out for equipment. That's usually the case. Like even, I want to assure people the joke with Anime Matsuri joining this, Anime Matsuri is not a trash fire yet. The biggest thing that's going to kill Anime Matsuri is if they have bad guests, bad attendees, and no volunteers. And if you really want to keep this convention going, volunteer. You'll be compensated, from my understanding. You might have issues with hotel rooms and stuff. And again, sometimes you gotta cut and run. And if you feel like it's going to turn into a scratch fire, don't be afraid to cut and run. Even if you volunteered, even if you said that you showed up to the hotel the day of, if it looks like it's really bad and a shit show. I mean, perfect example, look at the artist alley upstairs. How many artists cut and run because they can't make money? Yeah, but tell you what, that's the worst thing you can do as an artist, because that's how you kill a convention. If you get kicked out by the convention, that's the convention on itself. But you can kill a convention if you're attending it and you decide not to. So they lost out on money, maybe they saved money. But don't be afraid, like, it's an individual choice. I actually really like this year. It's a shit show, but I like the shit show. It's not trash fire. Like, again, this is not to the point where, because, okay, good example here. MagFest.
Yeah.
Have any, you said you've attended MagFest.
I attended 2020, yeah.
Okay. Have you ever been to, have you heard any stories from the Citadel?
I haven't heard about the Citadel.
Okay. The Citadel was a hotel in Richmond, Virginia before they moved to DC. There was 2 incidences because of guests that caused issues with us losing that hotel. One of them was individuals going through every single floor of the hotel. This is back when the fucking banana phone meme was a thing, and stealing the phones off of every single floor. And replacing them on the phone cords with a banana. There was an incident where a party room actually caused the bathroom to collapse into the floor below it. Yep. Have you ever filled up a bathtub with ice and put beer in? Yeah, so they overdid that. And that was after they had torn the sink off the wall doing the same thing. Yes.
I'm surprised it's kind of lasted as long as it did.
You know, I'm surprised too, actually, because Brandon, the original owner, sold it. He sold it to the group, which ended up, the LLC ended up taking over, and I stopped going after they sold it to this recent group that's running it. That was like 2016.
Oh, was it the one where like everyone who was an employee basically revolted from all the draconian bullshit they were doing?
Yep.
They got kicked out, didn't they?
I don't know, because I haven't talked to Brandon about that, and he would have the details on it.
Okay.
The last time, how many of you are familiar with guest wrangling? Are we okay with like just kind of going over, or do we need to get out of here? Okay. Okay. How many of you are familiar with guest wrangling? You know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay, guest wrangling is whenever you're the person that's supposed to make sure if the voice actor gets drunk, they go to the panel that they're supposed to go to. It is a very, very important job. And we don't have enough volunteers to do that because a lot of our volunteers get starstruck. There's also the big problem of sometimes your guests want to talk to everybody. They're walking them through the hallway, trying to get them to a panel, and they're talking to everybody because everybody's their friend. I used to do a little bit of guest handling and wrangling for Game Grumps. They're good people. They really are, but they will not shut up. They want to talk to everybody. Now, speaking of guest wrangling, I never ever want to be, I'm sorry I'm talking shit here. I'm telling y'all some dirty secrets. Channing Tatum?
Yeah.
I will never be a guest wrangler for him. Ever.
Yeah.
We've had ambulances called on him multiple times because he would get so drunk, you could not get him out of bed in the morning and you think he's dead.
Oh.
And he's not the only person that has problems like that. But guest wrangling is an incredibly important job, and like I said, most people can't do it because they get starstruck. But that's also it's the same problem. It's a self-control issue. There's been a couple times I've seen people who are amazing. Like I know I'm talking shit here, but there are amazing guests that will take over and just help you out. They'll actually volunteer and start working at the convention. They'll start helping out where you've got issues, where there's gaps. They'll even volunteer and make a panel happen when there wasn't a panel planned because of the fact that somebody else dropped out or didn't show up. Oh yeah, I'm gonna talk about panels because we're a shit panel here. What happens whenever you're running panels and organizing panels and you get a 15-year-old kid who wants to be a panel runner? Do you think they're gonna show up? What happens whenever they start getting trolled by their audience? Have you ever seen a 15-year-old kid break down crying?
Yeah.
Because somebody said, your horns look funny? Yeah. Homestuck. Yeah, Homestuck. Yeah. Have you ever seen a little kid run out of a panel crying and then there's no content to have the panel for? That's exactly my point. Why are you letting a fucking 15-year-old kid run a panel? They don't know jack shit. They have no experience. They can't handle any criticism, period. That will kill your convention, too. You have your panel organizers, example, that don't know or vet the people who are running their panels. And that becomes a problem. An example of that, getting back to DashCon, was all the rumors with the BDSM panel letting in under 18 kids in there. And having masturbation sessions in the panel room. Somebody called it an orgy, but it was more or less the panelists giving a demonstration. Another example would be ACON. ACON when it was over at Fort Worth.
What year?
Yeah.
Was it 2017?
I think I went to that one.
Do you remember the girl who was underage who started stripping on stage? There was a girl. No. Maybe it was at a panel. She was at a panel. It was supposed to be like a Q&A panel or something like that. She got roofied. She wasn't drinking alcohol. She got roofied and proceeded to get up on stage because she didn't know that her drink had been tampered with, and started stripping naked in front of an entire panel room.
Yes.
Fuck.
Yes.
I mean, they literally had to take the panel organizer and they had to take some of the security to go in there and wrap her up, call an ambulance to get her checked and see what was going on.
Yes.
Yeah. So like, again, going back to like, you need adults running your convention, you need adults that are running your panels, you need adults that are running your security, you need adults that are doing your, volunteer work, because if you don't, they don't know how to handle an emergency situation like that. I actually had to pull one person aside in a vendor's room one year because she almost passed out and busted her forehead on the concrete. Yeah. And we actually had to give her an IV because she was so dehydrated.
Yes.
How many of you know how to give a person an IV? Exactly. See, I've been trained how to do that, but I also make sure that I go get the IMSA that can do that. A 15-year-old kid cannot handle looking at somebody passing out without having a panic attack because they're not responsible. They don't have experience. And then what ends up happening is like, a perfect example too is these raves. Whenever people pass out in the corner on these raves and nobody checks on them, they're just sleeping in the corner or something like that, that's the volunteer's job. But the volunteers don't know that because they're not being trained by their volunteer heads. There's been a couple of times that at MagFest, getting back to MagFest, I'm not even talking about PAX or Otaku, but there's been incidences there too, mainly to do with fake blood all over like light rails and stuff like that, people getting robbed. Yeah. Sorry, this was supposed to be a trash fire thing, but then it ended up turning into like horror stories. My apologies.
No, that's what we came for.
Okay, we need to wrap up. They want us to kick us out. But before we go, the best place you can go and do your research for more details on these conventions is like they were hollering back there earlier. You go on and you look for Frederick Nansen down the rabbit hole, or you look for Internet Historian.
Yes.
And I know I talked about a lot of furry stuff to begin with, but there is a lot more in depth that they go over. Like, I don't even think I could get as into the details of stuff that they get into.
Down the rabbit hole has even gone into some of the court issues.
Yeah, the court issues, I would love to discuss the court issues, but each convention would have to have an entire hour-long panel for each of their court issues.
Yes.
Because there's just so many of them. So, but thank you for attending our shit show. Appreciate it. Yeah, they're kicking us out. Sorry, we can't have fun no more. Talking about, gross stuff.
When I had
Stay safe. Don't take Jello shots. Don't eat strange food given to you.
why am I?
Check your water.
I look like
Do not mix ammonia and chlorine to cleanse stains. If you see a diaper, leave it there. If you smell something gross, just tell the volunteer.
Oh man. No, worse for me was.
If you get heat stroke, call an ambulance. Stay safe.
It's like.
Sorry if I bored you. We are bored.
but like all the rooms out onto a court. And
Come on.
some fucking dipshit.